Hello, my dear students. My name is Fedorova. I am Associate Professor of the Department of Epidemiology, and my lecture is dedicated to the basic clinical epidemiology, evidence-based medicine. The plan of the lecture: definition of notion clinical epidemiology, aim of clinical epidemiology and evidence-based medicine. And the last position, which we will discuss, the methods of clinical epidemiology. First of all, randomized control trials, cohort studies, and case control studies. The aim of the lecture to form an idea of clinical epidemiology, evidence-based medicine, its role and place in medical practice, science, and education. Let's start with the definition of clinical epidemiology. Clinical epidemiology is a system of epidemiological methods used to select medical interventions in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. And of course, clinical epidemiology forms the methodological basis of evidence-based medicine. Let's discuss about evidence-based medicine. The formation of evidence-based medicine in the 80s of the 20th century, a group of epidemiologists from McMaster University, Canada, led by David Tackett, prepared a series of publications. The purpose of the publication is to help doctors evaluate the results of scientific research published in medical journals. Critical assessment. In the following years, a program is being developed to train doctors to evaluate and use the results of published studies. And today, evidence-based medicine is a system of knowledge about the process of certain evaluation and using information to select scientifically proven medical interventions in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. Evidence-based medicine was formed in the interest of clinical disciplines, and the methodological basis of evidence-based medicine is the methods of clinical epidemiology, which are applicable in any field: clinical medicine, preventive medicine, pharmacy, and health system. A competent specialist should be able to critically assess the reliability of information, sources, articles in order to effectively use medical literature. What does it mean? This means reading the right articles at the right time and changing professional behavior in the light of the information received. In addition, I must say that evidence-based medicine is about systematically reviewing, appraising, and using clinical research findings to aid the delivery of optimum clinical care to patients. And patients' knowledge of evidence-based medicine is important because it enables them to make more informed decisions about disease management and treatment. It also gives patients a more accurate perception of risk, encourage appropriate use of elective procedures, and supports evidence-based doctor-patient decision-making. Evidence-based medicine is a combination of principles and methods, and when put into action, this ensures that medical decisions, guidelines, and policies are based on the current best evidence about the effects of different forms of treatment and healthcare in general. But we must understand that with respect to medicines, it's draw heavily on the information from the benefit and risk, efficacy and safety evaluation. And of course, the decision maker need to look at knowledge from their one clinical experience along with the best evidence from controlled studies and research. Combining clinical experience and controlled studies in the decision-making process is very important, and without clinical experience, the risk related to the given treatment may end up causing unwanted effects. Let's look at the evidence-based medicine model, which includes 5 steps. Step number 1, defining a clinical relevant question. What does it mean? The doctor searches for information to find correct diagnosis. Step number 2, searching for the best evidence. Doctor searches for evidence to support the findings from step number 1. And step number 3, assessing the quality of the evidence. Doctor ensures that quality and reliability is high. Step number 4, acting on the evidence to form a clinical decision based on steps 1 to 3. Patient and doctor jointly make an informed treatment decision. Step number 5, evaluating the process. Doctor and patient assess if the intended outcome is achieved and adjust treatment decisions accordingly if needed. Let's discuss about patient engagement. Doctors' decision include conscientious, explicit use of the best evidence at the current time, including the patient experience when deciding how to provide the best possible medical treatment for a given patient. But patient engagement in decision-making processes have an important role to play in building new guidelines of treatment principles. And this includes reading, understanding, and acting on health information, working together with doctors to evaluate and select the right treatment options and providing feedback on outcomes. And of course, patients can have an active role to play at all levels of evidence. Critical evaluation of the medical article and how to read articles. So first of all, you should read the section, material, and research method. And of course, pay attention to these positions. Intervention, diagnosis, treatment, prevention is a consequence, a change in the state of health. Methods of clinical epidemiology that convincingly prove a cause and effect relationship. On the slide you can see the pyramid of evidence-based medicine where the methods are located according to the degree of proof. At the lowest position, the opinions of experts. The next position, description of the series of cases, case control studies, cohort studies, clinical randomized control trials, and meta-analysis. Editorials and expert opinions. This is evidence based on the opinions of the panel of experts aiming to shape common medical practice. Case series and case reports. Case series are descriptive studies following one small group of people. There are additions or supplements of case reports. Case report is a detailed report of the symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, and follow-up of the individual patient. A case control study is the observational retrospective study looking at historical data that compares patients who have a disease with the patient who don't have the disease. Outcomes such as lung cancer are generally studied by the use of case control studies. A group of smokers, the exposed group, and a group of non-smokers, the unexposed group, are recruited and followed over time. Look at the scheme of case control study. Randomly forms groups of people from among those who have case and don't have a certain disease. Control group. Control group similar to the main group and randomly selected 1, 2, 4 controls for one case. In each group, individuals are identified who have been exposed and don't exposed to a certain effect. Information about patient with disease with pathology cases and the persons or without disease controls group is collected on the basis of medical documents or a survey. A measure of the association between the exposure and disease development in case control study is the odds ratio. The ratio of the changes of the development of the disease in the exposed and the not exposed groups to a pathogenic factor, and we see the formula for calculating the odds ratio. What about advantages and disadvantages of case control studies? First of all, they carry out so quickly. They can be studied and carried out in a short time. They are allowed to study rare disease, and they allow us to study disease with a long latent period between the exposure factor and clinical manifestation. And of course, inexpensive in comparison with the other epidemiological studies. Suitable for studying as a multiply potential cause-active agent of diseases. And what about the disadvantages of case control studies? Exposure information based on the survey data and may be subject to bias, systematic selection error. Only one disease is being studied, and choosing a good control group can be difficult. The research methodology is difficult for non-specialists to understand. Cohort studies, this is an observational study in which a selected group of people is observed for a certain time. Look at the scheme of cohort studies. In cohort studies, healthy patient ready state and the cohort of those who were subjected to the intervention exposure and cohort not subjected to intervention exposure. Both cohort of patients are observed for a long time. This is a prospective research studies and studied by the same method. Advantages of cohort studies. They give a clear idea of the time sequence between exposure and disease. Provide an opportunity to study and multiply outcomes related to a particular exposure. Allow you to calculate the frequency of the occurrence, absolute risk and relative risk. And methodology and results of this study are well understood by non-specialists. Disadvantages of cohort studies. We are not suitable for the study of rare disease. For the formation of very large cohorts is required. They're not suitable for studying disease when a very long time passes between the exposure and the development of the disease. The nature of the exposure may change during the study, difficult in interpreting the results. Look at the scheme of randomized clinical trial. We have population. The population is split into two groups by random method and interventional and control groups, and outcomes for both groups are measured. I want to say that randomized clinical trial, this is a gold standard of the obtaining evidence of the effectiveness of medical intervention. A few words about meta-analysis. Meta-analysis is a systematic statistic-based review of data that combines results from the different but related studies in the attempt to identify patterns and other relationships across multiply studies. Meta-analysis can support a stronger conclusion that any individual study but may be flawed because the publication bias. So the lecture is all. Thank you for your attention. Be healthy. Goodbye.